Please welcome back, from Resilience Media, Matt Burns.
I wasn't wrong. It is wonderful outside, but I hope people are making their way back in right here. Part of the problem of programming this conference is there's so much to talk about. And right now we have 2 sessions running concurrently. Through those double doors right there is a breakout session with Holland and Knight. And I would highly encourage you to attend that session. If you're looking to launch in the US or deal with any regulations, if you're a startup, if you're an investor, if you're with a large company, that breakout session is fantastic for you. However, on this stage, we also have a great session with Leslie Hitchcock. She's going to be talking to 3 different defense companies, and they represent different stages in the defense company's life. We have a company that is well capitalized, and we have early stage startups as well. Each are quite different, but they're all working towards building a resilient defense base. And you know, that's just more than scale. That's about speed, adaptability, and trust. So, first, we have Rich Drake, General Manager at Anduril Industries UK. Then we have Oluseun Taiwo, CEO at Solideon. And then Cameron McCord, co-founder and CEO at Nominal, and of course, moderated by our Leslie Hitchcock. Give them a round of applause.
Hello. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've seen Russian provocation in Finland, Poland, Romania, Sweden, and Denmark. At our Munich Security Conference event that we did with the DIU, we argued that NATO must dramatically ramp up its defense industrial base, and that urgency is why we're here today. Not to do theory, but to talk about practice. So today we have a perspective from scale, startup, and then frontier manufacturing. And what we want to talk about is how do we build resilience and defense industrial base that's real, fast, and lasting. So let's just dive right in. Olu, when we were last on stage together in Munich, it was 6 months ago and everything was completely different. I feel like we say this all the time. From where you sit, what do you see as the weakest link in terms of our defense industrial base?
Yeah, thanks for having me back here. It was super great to be here 6 months ago with you and Resilience Media. But I think we're seeing, some of the pitfalls on companies and governments actually being able to meet in the middle is policy, right? A lot of the times you don't have startups actually in the room, specifically the smaller ones at my stage, right? When we're writing policies on acquisition, you're not even involved in that. So I think it's really hard to go and field new capability, right? Especially when that acquisition period takes longer. It's a lot harder to adopt that, at least from our side of the world, when you're not a part of those conversations. I think you're starting to see companies get a little bit smarter in how they become part of that room. You can pay to play if you raise a lot of venture money. I think what we've done is we've partnered with a lot bigger primes that actually do a lot of that that lobbying for us to make sure that we get a seat at the table. But I think you're starting to see folks getting a lot smarter for that. To make sure that they have a voice and they can understand how the process actually works.
Rich, from Anduril's perspective, what is the weakest link in terms of building a resilient industrial base?
I think certainly I can speak for the UK rather than anywhere else, and that it feels to me that everybody's talking the right game, but we are yet to move at the pace we need to go to be ready, have that level of resilience. We were all very excited by our SDR, yet we need to wait perhaps another 10 months before we get our defense industrial plan, from which we then start to buy and deliver things. We're losing time as time moves on.
So for our non-Brits in the audience, the SDR is the Strategic Defense Review, which was a long-anticipated review of our defense here in the UK. So Cameron, you are a software layer, so I'm sure you see a really, really interesting, an interesting perspective on where this process could be strengthened. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's been incredible to see, in the last several years, I think across the whole thread of activities that need to happen to scale capacity and production, everything from rare earth minerals, supply chain, manufacturing, and amazing companies, building hardware products for the defense industrial base. What we notice at Nominal particularly is that a lot of the software, particularly around testing, validating, and certifying these systems, has now become, in many instances, one of the bottlenecks, and that's our mission, is to try to accelerate that, particularly a lot of the software that was built in this industry, broadly speaking in industrials, but aerospace, manufacturing, was not really forced to modernize until the pressures of increased production, much shorter program timelines, necessitated by the national security environment, has really pushed that to happen faster than ever before, and software can play a really big part in that.
And so talk a little bit about this, because you are, one of your backers is General Catalyst, who has their software-defined hardware investment thesis, and you were at Anduril before. Can you talk a little bit about how, seeing somebody who's very involved in the defense industrial base, and how that inspired you to found Nominal and to grow it?
Sure. I describe, I think, simply put, it is a solved problem in the world today to test, deploy, monitor, and observe software. There have been massive billion-dollar businesses that have been built software to do that for software. The venture community played a very big part in that, but really that's where a lot of the activity has happened in the software world over the last 2 decades. And that same luxury does not exist if you are building software-defined hardware. Robotic systems, autonomous systems, and that is really our mission. I think in a very exciting way, we have a little bit of a crystal ball, because there are a lot of lessons learned from seeing that industry grow very quickly. And so we're able to take some parallelisms, some best practices to that. But there are sufficient differences where it sort of necessitates a completely different, software platform.
Mm-hmm. So. You're nodding. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what's so interesting, that when you see folks like Anduril and the folks that have walked before, startups like mine, it's like we're learning the lessons in real time, right? Like you're saying, you no longer can just sell a robot and that be your contribution to the industrial base, right? You have to have a sustaining business model, right, that's going to be able to not just help your customers, but help your business survive, so that you can actually continue to contribute, right? So that you can be a trusted, contractor for the DoD. So I think I'm nodding my head because it's so funny when you start a startup, right, and you get fielded all these questions, right, about, okay, like, what's your business model, right? How do you look through scaling that, right? How do you sustain that, right? How do I grow year over year, right? Like, it's not just about cool, sexy robotics anymore. It's about, like, okay, if I want to help the warfighter, my business has to survive. So I'm just nodding because it's a lesson that, I'm sure all 3 of us have had to field at some point. So, yeah.
And Anduril is very well known for their manufacturing capabilities in the U.S. Can you speak to a bit about what it looks like in Europe and the U.K.?
Well, yeah, certainly. We're looking to replicate that in the UK and in Europe, depending on where the business is and where the contracts are. And we've spent a lot of time now looking to UK non-traditional manufacturing SMEs, non-traditional. When I say non-traditional, I mean non-defense traditional. Really, because the defense traditionals are already super busy, and they tend to suffer from having done the same thing the same way for 40 years, which doesn't necessarily suit a business model like ours. Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time working with organizations like Make UK to find the smaller SMEs that we can then integrate with to work in this kind of more rapid way.
Mm-hmm. And so that's an interesting, interesting perspective, because we have Anduril is founded in America, but obviously you're representing Anduril Industries UK. You're leading it, and then we have Nominal and Solideon, who are U.S.-based companies, and there's a lot of conversation abroad here, where we are, about sovereignty. And so, while navigating sovereignty, European sovereignty, UK sovereignty, but also acknowledging that we can learn from others, how is is that something that is, top of mind for Anduril right now as you're looking to scale your manufacturing capabilities?
It's top of my mind every day. We'll always be a US headquartered company. We're never going to be anything else. But we can be a sovereign UK business, because what does that mean?
Right.
That means using the UK supply chain. It means giving freedom of action to government, and then for freedom of action to the warfighter, and investing in factories, investing in SMEs, investing in education and apprenticeships. And it's quite multifaceted. It's, like you say, it's not just building a robot anymore. It's how can I repeatably build it and provide freedom of action for government around us. I think sometimes people get a bit lost, and it means giving away IP. It's not. It's about use of and that freedom of action.
So that is something that we hear consistently, and I'm glad that you brought that up, is that a lot of the establishment, shall we say, primes, government, military, need to understand that they can learn from how startups operate, and even especially the highly capitalized ones, in order to reframe how they see what things that they think are problematic, but are actually just challenges that we can help solve if we're really centering startups in the middle of this conversation. Cameron, with considering that you do software, is this something that you have encountered, the sovereign question? Have you scaled outside of the U.S. yet in terms of the clients or the people that you're working with in your software testing software supporting?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Part of the reason why I'm here and very excited to be here. I think we recently opened a London office. We are doing business in the UK and EU, and very excited to be doing that. I think I think when I think about the sovereignty question, I think Nominal plays a very it fits in that world very nicely. Our whole mission is to build software and take a process and optimize it. And so I think when you look at what does sovereignty mean, which I think, Rich, you sort of captured very, very succinctly, I think we look at Nominal is it's a way to test and validate your systems, I think being the key operative word there. I think when we look about sort of expanding into this market, we think about a couple things. I think one is partnerships and collaboration, whether that be with companies like Anduril, which we're very proud to support, or more of the traditional defense industrial base here as well. And I think a big thing I think is leaning into trust-based relationships. I think not thinking that we're can just come over and very quickly sort of start to move with pace, but really try to understand the business model, how our partners here think and operate their constraints, how we can be useful with our software platform.
So Olu, y'all have raised seed capital. Congratulations, that's an enormous achievement. But that means you're very early stage. Can you talk a little bit about what Solideon does, just because I don't know how familiar people are with your technology. I have the luxury of being, since we've met before, and you were on our stage before, but I'm curious if we can draw also from what Cameron was just talking about with partnerships, how that has factored as y'all are growing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, simply put, in the fewest amount of words possible, we'll try. Solideon takes robotics, merges that with metal 3D printing or welding, and we build large hardware for the defense industrial base, things that are the size of, 3 to 4 meters wide by 3 to 4 meters tall. And so what's interesting about that is when we start talking about those sizes, you're really talking about the maritime industrial base, right? And that's been our key focus to start in. And for us, as a startup, you can't take something like that on with, I think initially when we were really getting to the industrial base, we had only raised maybe 4 or 5 million at the time. Today we're about 10 total raised. So even then, it's like you don't have enough resources to go tackle everything. So you have to use primes and partnerships. One of the cool things is if you are really, there's opportunity and then there's luck that follows, right? And in both of those spaces for us, it happened where one of our board members actually owns a really big maritime industrial company in the U.S., one that actually always a favorite of our government and our Navy, and so that's actually been our way into selling directly, right? We're working on a couple of opportunities for OTAs and things like that, where the government can just directly buy from us because of that relationship. So I think those are things that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have that connection. I think, once again, opportunity meets luck and merges on that, and those are things that accelerate you to more capital, right? When folks can see you've de-risked your business and de-risked the technology when a prime actually uses you, right? They intake your technology and want to deploy it at their sites. I think that's the really exciting opportunity that we've seen actually have helped us work to move quickly without having to raise a lot more than we probably should at this stage. So yeah.
And Rich, how does Anduril partner with both within the establishment, but also with startups and their technologies?
Well, I'd like to say we do it very well, but other people could tell us whether that is true or not, obviously. Look, there's room here for everybody, we believe. The market's growing. The need for innovation and speed of movement means that we look to partner with these newer businesses, with the startups, with the exciting tech that can really help us move forward. Similarly, we'll happily work with any of the primes that wish to work with us. Sometimes that can be more difficult because they just think in a different way. Everybody wants the same thing. They just approach it in a different way, and I think it's kind of easier to hang out with your friends sometimes.
So when we held our event at Munich Security Conference, it was an entire day focused on defense tech manufacturing. And we were very much inspired by the book Freedom's Forge, which I'll give a plug for it here, it's excellent, about how the American industrial base won World War II. And what we found really interesting about the messages that are really woven through that book is how there was a lot of trust that the government made into private entities, private organizations, private companies, both enormous, also people who had never built things before but got the contracts and then just went and did it. Things that I wonder if our governments today would be as willing to engage with, that were seen as part of the process and had the way smoothed for them back when we were facing World War II or in World War II. That being said, what is your perspective on government friction? Like, is that something that it is? How supportive are they being as as three companies are looking to help scale the industrial base in your own ways?
Well, I'll kick off. I think, again, I can only speak for UK government, who probably are in the room as well. They're very nice people. They want us to lean in and help. I don't necessarily think the money is there yet in order to invest, and that's difficult. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to, businesses my size need a commitment longer than 1 year to do that. Businesses of a smaller size absolutely need that commitment to attract the capital to invest in the infrastructure. So I kind of think we're stuck between two places yet. Not yet at a war economy, and I hope we never have to get to a war economy. We're not yet at a war economy where governments have other pressures to invest in other things. So I think the willingness is there, but the government capital may not be there, which in turn doesn't necessarily attract the investor capital that we need to get the infrastructure correct.
Yeah, I can offer a perspective from the engagements we've had in the U.S. with the federal government in the department. I'd say, in a positive framing, I think there's been a massive amount of progress made in the last 5 to 7 years. I think it is one of the easiest times it's been to, get started building a company here, and I'd be really curious for your perspectives as you're, again, continuing to grow. I think, to Rich's point, reaching real scale and production of your technology, I think, is something that still has to be solved. I think I'll give another positive framing, which I think is we've seen an appetite, particularly in the U.S., to lean into software more. I think there's a lot of software acquisition pathways and different legislation, and there still is a lot, I think, to be done, and proof will be in the pudding. But I think it's been exciting for us, a 3-year-old company, to be able to sell a lot of our software to the government, and that was simply something that would not have been possible even 5 years before. You would have had to educate what is software as a service, what is this product, like how can the government consume it and buy it and scale it. And so I think there's been a lot of progress there.
And do you think that and then I'll let you jump in, but just a quick follow-on question, do you think that is as a result of venture being more involved in helping government understand why this is important, or is it institutions like the DIU helping smooth that way? I'm just curious to know because it is extraordinary that you've only been around for 3 years. You're projected to be a unicorn within the next 5. And so, I'm very interested to know where you see the help to get you that much farther ahead.
Yeah, I think it takes a village. I think it is whether companies like Anduril that have been leading the way. I think it is the investor community. You referenced General Catalyst. They've been an amazing partner. They have the General Catalyst Institute. They're in Washington. I think helping to educate lawmakers. It is also, I think, just the climate of what is happening. Whether it's a sort of macro, global threat with the Chinese Communist Party, or what is going on in Europe here, I think that urgency is palpable, and I think it is starting to permeate even portions of the government that have traditionally been slower. And for what we see specifically, when program managers are thinking about the classic cost, performance, and schedule of major programs, and they think about how testing can help alleviate some of those challenges, I think they pick their head up, and we've been able to have conversations at the right time.
Olu.
Yeah, I think these are awesome points to hear it. Our government back at home is quite obsessed with fielding new technology, and I think what's interesting about that now is they're not just thinking about how you field new technology, but it's like, how do we build it, right? Like, that's critical, right? We've been deindustrializing, someone could argue as a country the last 50 plus years, right? And so now I think it's not just about how do we build new things, it's like how do we tap into the different regions in the US that are really strong at certain things. So right now, Texas is having a renaissance of incredible companies who are building great manufacturing technologies. I can name a couple and a few, but I just think it's awesome because with that comes the support now around, okay, advanced manufacturing, or manufacturing in general, isn't always the sexiest venture backable thing. God knows it's not. That's been the struggle that we've had the last 2 years, right? Is to explain why it is, right? But I think now Ukraine, fortunately or unfortunately, the way that you can look at it, it's proven why it is. It's very important, and acquiring that technology, onboarding it, and then being able to scale that's like what I'm saying, that's the money pot there. So I think for us, it's like we're seeing a lot more, specifically in DC, we're seeing a lot more action and a lot more support towards, building towards that. And, it's funny because I think we're starting to get some, inspiration really from seeing how Europe is doing it, on the Eastern Front, so.
Yeah. So last question. It's 2027, Russia's escalated again. If we haven't built up our industrial base by then, what's one capability that you think we will most regret not having invested in today?
I'm going to go first. Sorry, I'm just going to steal this one.
Go for it.
In Europe, we have an estimated 370,000 industrial robotic arms. There's no reason why those can't be fielded to utilize building large metal, things that you need on the industrial front, especially closer to where your technology is operating. I think if we don't have companies beyond myself thinking through how do we mobilize that, right? Because we're not going to have our casting and foundries, be existent forever. I think that's a huge miss, specifically on forward operating procedures. So I think that would be the technology that I'm like, it exists today. It's not sci-fi 6 years from now. Like, somebody has to tap in and use that to build. So I'm really excited to see someone step up to that challenge here.
I can go. I think one that is critical and lessons learned, I think, the hard way often, but I would just say, broadly speaking, EW, electronic warfare capability, both active and passive. So GPS denied capabilities for for drones and other uncrewed systems, as well as jamming capabilities. And I'll make a plug. All of those need testing. So
Yeah.
I would have said, kind of riffing on what you're saying here, is about developing those alternate supply chains. Europe's great at building cars. Well, we're not going to be building cars come a wartime, so how can we use those different supply chains? How can we design our equipment such that we can roll it into different factories? To wind back in the UK, just pre-Second World War, we should be creating these shadow factories again, or at least getting ready to create the shadow factories again.
Right. Well, thank you all very, very much. This is a great conversation, and thank you. See you soon.
thank you.